I'm going to ask you one more coming in hot here. One more crazy question.
Okay.
Just hearing you talk about the atmosphere, kind of a fun one. Is the Earth flat, and why or why not?
No. It is not flat.
My name is Corey Evitz, and I am not a rock star. I am a caffeine junkie, licensed minivan operator, touring musician, and a proud American. Ride with me as I tour the greatest country on earth and talk to the real rock stars, our local legends, small town heroes, and those who bravely serve our country. And even though I'm not a rock star, I do live a pretty rock and roll life. This is it. This is America. This is the Not a Rock Star podcast.
All right, guys. Well, welcome back to Not a Rock Star with Corey Evitz. I'm your host, Corey Evitz, and I'm here with a local celebrity. Would you like to introduce yourself to the fine people?
Sure, be happy to. So my name is Trent Okerson. I am the chief meteorologist at WPSD Local 6 and Metropolis, Illinois native. And I've been blessed to be able to do the job that I love now for about 18 years.
So I'm going to start off with a quote by some very wise street prophets. You know them as Outcast. You can plan a pretty picnic, but you can't predict the weather. But some people can predict the weather, and so Trent is one of them. And that's what we're going to be discussing today, his job as a meteorologist and an on-air personality. So Trent, we're going to come in hot, and I'm just going to ask you the number one question that probably everybody wants to know. Why is it impossible to literally just predict the weather accurately 100% of the time?
Well, meteorology will probably never be a perfect science. It's an imperfect science. And the main reason for that is that we are surrounded by a gigantic ocean of air that's constantly moving and constantly changing. So the atmosphere is 10 to 15 miles high, and it's invisible. It has all different temperatures, moisture, and it's constantly moving. So the way that we forecast is you sample the atmosphere as best you can with the current conditions. That information is then fed into these massive, gigantic supercomputers that run what we call forecast models, which is essentially a simulation of the atmosphere based on what's happening right now, what's going to happen over the next few hours, days, or weeks. And those models have improved dramatically over the last 10, 20, 30 years, but they will never be perfect because you never can totally capture a perfect snapshot of the atmosphere. So we have numerous ways of collecting current weather data, whether it's weather stations at airports, weather sensors that are on airplanes, boats, buoys in the ocean, satellite data. There's dozens of ways to collect that, but you never can get a true full picture of what the atmosphere looks like right now. And so because you're putting an imperfect picture of the atmosphere into the models, they're going to spit out an even less perfect picture of the atmosphere with their output. And the atmosphere is chaotic. And so if you know anything about chaos theory, scientific terminology there, like basically everything over time becomes less orderly and less organized. And with forecast models, as you go out in time, the margin of error increases. And so if the models get something wrong an hour from now, then it builds on that error within 6 hours and 12 hours and 3 days, a week, whatever, that error gets magnified. And so the forecast models get less accurate with time. So as much processing power and computing power as we have right now, you still are never really able to get a perfect forecast.
And there's an element of it too that's just, it's impossible. Even if you did have perfect snapshots, things could they're fluid, so things could change. Even if you fed into the models an absolute perfect picture of the atmosphere right now, it's ever changing. So 10 minutes from now, it's going to be slightly different, right?
Yeah, right. And it's almost like if you envision, playing Plinko, we all probably grew up watching The Price is Right. If you knew exactly where that Plinko chip was going whenever you released it, and you had a pretty good idea of where it was going, maybe on the second or third rung, but by the time it gets all the way to the bottom, you have no idea where it's going. And that kind of is a visual idea of how forecast models work, that you start, you know pretty well where you're starting from, but because of that fluidity over time, models can diverge one way or the other, and so the output over time gets less and less accurate.
And this is going to be a probably terrible analogy or example, but while you were describing all of that, I was thinking of all those movies from like the 70s and 80s where they would have like a helicopter or, you know, like police cameras all over a city, and they would locate the bad guy, and they would be like, he's going east on 32nd Street. I think he's headed to such and such, you know. Even in, like, if you think of those scenarios, like those famous cop movies where they're chasing the bad guy and they've got a helicopter that's got a, you know, their view of him and maybe street cameras. And so maybe they've located the bank robber, and it looks like they're 4 blocks away from another bank. So they can say, it looks like he's headed to another bank. There's nothing to say that that guy wouldn't just like pull in a garage and escape. You know, you can't actually predict what he's going to do. You can just take the information you have and do the best you can with it.
Yeah.
But that's all anybody can ever do at any time.
Yeah.
So, well, I wanted to ask you that first. Man, I don't really get on like the news websites. I don't really watch the news. I just kind of have a general sense of, I'll look up weather, Paducah, Kentucky, you know, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But I know a lot of people are locked and loaded on it. And I'm sure you get people who are extremely mean sometimes and negative. So we wanted to ask that, we being Toby and I both, wanted to try to get that information out to people that it's never going to be a 100% slam dunk because Trent isn't Jesus. So you need to get off of him and any of the other weather people. But you guys have saved, there's no telling how many lives with the weather forecasts. And so those are things we're going to talk about a little bit later, because you've been doing this now for 18 years and you've got all kinds of stories about giant weather events that you've kind of warned us about and kept us safe by your constant updates. But let's go ahead and back up. Let's talk a little bit about your formative years. When you were younger, did you see yourself being a meteorologist? And if not, kind of what was your progression into this career?
Yeah. So like I said, I am from Metropolis, and I did grow up very enthusiastic and interested in the weather. I think initially that stems back to a fear of storms. Whenever I was a little kid, I was pretty scared of thunderstorms. I hated thunder and lightning. And I think kind of out of that fear, I would like go home after school or even before I was even in kindergarten and turn on the Weather Channel and see, you know, are they forecasting any thunderstorms for us? Kind of out of that fear was birthed a fascination. My papa, he kind of helped me get over that fear a little bit whenever we would have a storm. Like, we would go out on his front porch and just watch it sometimes if it was safe to do so. You know, obviously not during a severe storm or anything like that. But he would tell me this ridiculous story that if there was thunder, he would say that the tater wagon was tipping over, which to this day, I don't really know what a tater wagon is. But it was funny, and it made me feel better about it. And there's also kind of a family connection to weather. My papa, that was my grandpa, and my grandma on my mom's side, they were from Heron and Cambria, Illinois, and both lived within a few miles of the path of the 1925 tri-state tornado, which was the longest and deadliest tornado in United States history. And so they told me stories about, what it was like in the days after that. My dad's family's home out in rural Massac County was destroyed by a tornado in the 1960s. And so there was kind of a family connection there. I saw a couple of pretty wicked storms whenever I was 4 or 5 years old. I remember being at my grandma's house, and of course, having lost her home, she was extremely fearful of storms. And I remember her screaming one day, "Get to the basement, it's a twister." And so we all ran to the basement, and I looked out the window and I saw the roof of the neighbor's outbuilding blow off and land in her backyard. And she was pretty shaken up by that. And so that kind of all contributed to both a fear and fascination of storms for me. And so by the time I got into kindergarten, I was a pretty religious Weather Channel viewer, and would watch every day and then go to school and talk about what the weather was going to do. And I think I probably drove Miss Rudolph a little bit nuts talking about cold fronts and thunderstorm watches and things like that. So because of my interest in weather, she actually went to church with Cal Sisto and his family. Cal Sisto was the legendary chief meteorologist back in the 80s, 90s, and parts of the 2000s. And because of my interest in weather, she set me up for my 6th birthday in 1986, a chance to tour the TV station. And I got to meet Cal. I still have the gigantic fax machine weather maps that he used that day in my file cabinet. And that was like a core memory for me, which is a really cool thing. And so that's kind of where my interest in weather was birthed, and I was always interested in weather. As I got a little bit older, there were a few events that kind of, well, back up, I should have probably studied meteorology straight out of high school. I didn't. I got a degree in biology and taught high school science in Pope and Massac County, which was fun. But kind of during that same time frame, there was an EF4 tornado that hit Massac County. Hurricane Katrina happened, and so there were these big weather events that kind of refueled that interest for me, and I decided I was going to go back to school. And while I was teaching, I was taking classes online through Mississippi State University. I spent a couple of summers as an intern at WPSD. Jennifer Rukavina was so kind as to invest in my career. She gave me the opportunity to basically just kind of come over and hang out with her on the weekends back in like 2006 and 7, and practice at the green screen and just kind of learn on the job, if you will. And we had a couple of openings at the station in 2007. They called me up and said, "We need somebody to fill in. Would you be interested in doing part-time weather on the weekends?" So I was teaching during the week, doing weather on the weekends, and then after about 3 months, that turned into a full-time job, and 18 years later, here we are.
Wow. And just thinking about your 18 years, there's been so many huge weather events.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you one more coming in hot here. One more crazy question.
Okay.
Just hearing you talk about the atmosphere, kind of a fun one. Is the Earth flat, and why or why not?
No. It is not flat. So I don't even know where that started, and like I'm not sure that I can even process like no, it's not. Like you see, like look at a shadow. It's the shadows move. Like it's all because the Earth is round. It spins around other round objects. No, it's not flat. And I don't even know how to respond to that one, honestly.
Yeah. Well, like I told you, we were talking about it off camera. I think a lot of people, when they get to know me, may think I'm a contrarian. As Toby says, there's nothing cookie cutter about me. And my friend Sam is like, you don't even belong to any organization, you know? So, but as I get older, you know, that contrarian streak, I guess I have, or that independent whatever, a lot of things that are conspiracies, I'm doing air quotes for those of you only listening, end up being true. Like we have been lied to repeatedly, you know, by the government over the last, say, 50, 60 years. But that's one I could just not get with. So with like no knowledge of the atmosphere other than pulling from like 6th grade science class, you know, it would be hard for me to believe that every world government has just got this one gentleman's agreement. You know, like North Korea and South Korea, they want to both wipe each other off the face of the planet, but they've agreed to lie about flight paths. And every pilot ever is either uneducated or is willing to like keep their mouth shut. That's why I could just never believe that.
Yeah.
Other than, again, all the things I've been taught. But yeah, that was just a fun one.
Well, I mean, conspiracy theories as a whole, like, think about how hard it is to keep a surprise birthday party a secret.
Right.
And like, if you got 10 people and you're like, don't say anything, don't give away any clues, like, you really think we can get the whole world to like okay, keep this one a secret. Let's not tell any, like, come on, you can't do that.
All the map makers, I mean, since
Right.
we've had satellites, everybody's just kept their mouth shut. Like, yeah. You had mentioned that you get asked about chemtrails a lot.
Yeah.
So, like, let's just go ahead and do that one, too,
Okay.
while we're on it.
So that's, yeah, like in the world of meteorology and weather, the biggest conspiracy theory is chemtrails. If you're not familiar with what that is, it's the idea that the government or some rogue agency is spraying chemicals out of airplanes to either control the weather, cloud seeding, or some other nefarious activities. And I mean, I can sort of get, you can actually like look up in the sky and see if there's a jet that goes by and then there's white clouds behind it. I can sort of understand that it may look like you're spraying something. Here's what happens. It's actually, the scientific concept behind it is pretty simple. Think about if you go outside and it's 35 degrees and kind of humid and you breathe out hot, humid air out of your mouth, what happens? You can see your breath, right? So you're creating a cloud. There's cold, humid air that's in place, and if you add heat to it, it condenses, which is a pretty elementary level scientific concept. So if you go up in the atmosphere, the temperature is way colder than it is at the surface. And if there's even a little bit of moisture there, the atmosphere is close to saturated. So if you fly a plane with super hot jet exhaust blowing out of the back of the engine, that hot air is basically the same as if you can see your breath. It causes the cloud to form. Now today, it's crystal clear blue sky. That's because there's still planes up there. You can check flightaware.com and verify that. But there's very little moisture up there. And so the plane flies through it, but because the air is extremely dry, there's nothing to condense. So there's no contrails, which is the actual name for them. On a day where the humidity level at 35,000 feet, cruising altitude, where that is higher, you fly a jet through that, and that air condenses, and so it causes that cloud to form. And if there's enough moisture there, that cloud will linger and kind of gradually expand and form a cirrus cloud, basically. And so that's really all that it is. The idea of cloud seeding, that actually does happen in very limited quantities, like in the western United States, specifically to help like ski resorts to generate a little bit more precipitation. But the amount of energy that you would have to input into the atmosphere to have any control at all over the weather is so much larger than what a human can actually like generate right now, that it's just physically impossible to do that. And even with like some of those cloud seeding operations where you're in a really dry part of the world and you're trying to enhance precipitation rates, it might only boost it by 10 or 15%. So
That's
it really doesn't have much of an effect.
Yeah, I didn't even know. Okay, so you're the first person who would be educated enough to actually speak on this that I've ever talked to. I mean, I have friends who will say things casually, and so I've heard about cloud seeding, but didn't know how valid that was. So it is something that can be done, but it's not like somebody can cause a hurricane off the coast of Miami.
It is attempted. Like the U.S. military attempted it, I think, during either Korea or Vietnam, and it was basically not successful, and so it was kind of abandoned. But there are still some. Again, it's mainly used like out west where it's already really dry and they have a really hard time getting precipitation. So it's only used to kind of enhance that if possible. But no, I mean, the amount of energy contained like in a single thunderstorm is, the same amount of energy that's packed into like a nuclear weapon. Like you just simply can't disrupt a hurricane or a thunderstorm by any means that we have access to. It's too big of a scale. There's too much energy there. That kind of goes back to like around here, people say, well, that storm hit the river. The river just knocked that storm out. So you got to keep in mind, like a thunderstorm is maybe 10 square miles around, like a garden variety thunderstorm. And what's the Ohio or Mississippi River? Maybe 3/4 of a mile to a mile wide. There's not a difference in temperature or air mass change with that's going to be enough to like honestly disrupt a storm system that's, a dozen square miles or a large scale storm system that's hundreds of square miles. Like it's not going to hit the river and just die out. That's just kind of one of those things. It's kind of an old wives' tale, and scientifically it's not really accurate.
I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't even think to ask you about that, but that's something I've always wondered because I've always lived on the river.
Yeah.
In fact, we know each other because we're both from Metropolis, and my brother and you are very close friends, so I've known you my whole life. But yeah, when I was a kid, I lived 12 blocks from the river, and now I live about 5 blocks from the river. So that's always a big thing is like with tornadoes, for instance, like what's going to happen when it gets to the river, But do you believe even with like a tornado, there's no like significant alteration of the path of a tornado when it hits a body of water like that?
No, I mean, we've got multiple examples of tornadoes that have easily crossed the river. The December 10th tornado, it went across the Mississippi River easily without any impact. I mean, we've had little tornadoes even that have crossed from Ballard over into Massac County that have hit over toward Joppa and Metropolis. The Brookport tornado, it went across the Ohio River. Evansville had a tornado back in 2005. It crossed the Ohio River 3 different times, like just the windy path of the river. The tornado went across it 3 different times. It really just doesn't have any kind of an effect. And I think there's just a lot of examples where, a line of storms comes in, especially if it comes in like late in the evening as you're cooling down. If you cool down, typically the atmosphere is becoming less energized. And so as that storm comes in from the west, if it's coming in like late in the evening and you're losing energy, then as it gets close to the river, it just kind of naturally fades out. There's examples just this past, Saturday night, as of this recording, we had some storms. They were kind of weakening, and then the atmosphere, some winds kicked in after they got past the river, and the storms blew up again. So, it's just kind of one of those things. I think it's just been passed down through the generations, but there's not really anything to it.
Well, speaking of this past weekend, I had a great weekend. I played in Heron on Halloween night and then had 2 shows on Saturday. But real quick, let me tell you guys where I'm going to be this upcoming weekend. Tomorrow on Friday night, November 7th, I will be back in Alabama at the Casual Pint in Huntsville from 6 to 10. And then on Saturday, November 8th, I will be in Krill Springs at the VFW from 9 to midnight. So hopefully I see you guys out this weekend. Make sure you check the forecast so you can dress appropriately. But yeah, let's go back to some of these major weather events you've experienced. So was it 2006 or 2007, I guess, when you officially, this became your career?
Yeah, I started in October of 2007.
So let's just kind of go in chronological order of
Yeah.
kind of the big ones. Was the ice storm of 2009 kind of your first huge weather event?
Yeah, it was, well, so in 2008, we had, and I'm not sure how many people will remember this one, but a really freak windstorm. It was in September of 2008. We had Hurricane Ike hit down around Galveston, Texas. The remnants of that came up across our area and on a Sunday morning produced this widespread, like 70, 75 mile per hour swath of wind and knocked down trees and power lines. That was probably my first like freak weather event. But yeah, the ice storm of 2009 was my first real major event. And honestly, probably is the second most impactful, or maybe it's, as far as how many people were affected, probably is the most impactful weather event that I've worked. Because you think about how many people, like the entire state of Kentucky was impacted by that. And in our area, all of our Kentucky counties, we had like catastrophic level damage. I will never forget, I believe it started on a Monday night. I was the weekend meteorologist at the time, but our news director told pretty much everybody at the station, come to work today before the storm hits, pack a bag and prepare to be here for several days. So I did that. Went by Walmart on my way to work just for some last minute supplies that I thought I might need, and was checking out. I look over the aisle next to me. I see this dude that's about my height, tan skin and bald head. And I was like, yep, that's Jim Cantori. And I knew it was like, okay, well, we're in bad shape. He's here. So like seeing him, like I already knew from forecasting it was going to be bad. That kind of drove it home. But yeah, I mean, that was just an awful event because it affected so many people. It was the largest, at the time, the largest power outage in the state of Kentucky's history. And we had people that were out without power for a month, and it like dramatically altered the way we lived our lives for, a week to a month. That was a huge event. The flood of 2011, probably the second worst flood on the Ohio River since 1937. Again, that just impacted a huge number of people. A lot of tornadoes. The Leap Day 2012 Harrisburg tornado.
I remember that. Yeah.
That was a bad one. I mean, just personally, I was at work that morning, kind of assisting with coverage, and I used to teach high school at Pope County, and I actually learned that morning that one of my former students lost her life in that tornado. So it was kind of one of those moments where, what I do for a living actually like had a personal impact and connection. The Brookport tornado in 2013. Was it 20? No, it's 20.
Yeah, it was 2013.
It was 2013. Yeah. The years kind of run together at some point. To some degree, you lose track of all the big ones, but obviously, kind of the most recent, probably the one that had the biggest impact on me professionally was the December 10th tornado. That is just one, like we've had a lot of significant tornadoes in our area, but that one was just on a whole other level.
2021, is that when that was?
That was December 10th, 2021. That tornado developed back in Arkansas, and looking at it on radar, like if you pull out a textbook of what does a tornado look like on radar, that was the one. And we knew even before it got to our area. If this thing holds together, and it probably will because the environment was so volatile and was so charged up that particular evening, we knew that it was going to be a bad night for somebody. If that storm held together into our area, we knew we were going to have big problems. And of course, it went across the Boot Heel in Tennessee. It actually fizzled out for about 10 miles. And then as soon as it hit the Kentucky-Tennessee line, dropped down again, immediately intensified, and was within just a few minutes a mile-wide tornado. And looking at it on radar, I had never seen anything that looked like it before. And I even said that on TV. And I told people, like, this is going to be the storm that we talk about for years in our area. One of the things that was really difficult for me with that evening was the day before I had done a school visit in Mayfield. One of the things that we do as part of our job is we do a lot of community outreach, and specifically school visits. We'll go to elementary schools and kind of supplement if the teacher's doing a weather lesson. We'll go in and talk about, just basic weather terminology and severe weather safety and stuff. So I was at Central Elementary just outside of Mayfield the day before on December 9th and was talking to sixth graders, and I told them even then, okay, so we've got the potential for some bad weather tomorrow. So let's make sure that we review our safety plan, know where to go, make sure your parents have your weather radio turned on and have the WPSD radar app so that you can get warnings. And so while I'm on air, you've got this mile-wide tornado that's barreling right toward this school and this community that I just visited the day before. And this is 2 weeks away from Christmas. So in my mind, I'm thinking, what is getting ready to happen to these people? Like, their lives are getting ready to be completely turned upside down. I don't know if they're physically going to be okay. I don't know what's going to happen to their property, their homes. And it stinks because you have no control over it. I can do everything that I can to communicate to them what is about to happen, but you still can't stop it. And it's kind of a helpless feeling. And so there were moments that night. That was probably the only time that I was having a hard time keeping my composure on air, because the last thing that I want to do is scare people or give people more of a reason to be anxious, because my job is to inform and help people stay safe. And, there's a lot of people that have anxiety. And so I try to calm that by giving just good, solid information. And that night was difficult because I knew bad things were going to happen. And I had to try to just keep it together the best that I could.
And I want to really touch on that you guys literally save lives. And I want to kind of talk about some of the weather events real quick that you mentioned, because really all of those kind of play into my evolution of paying attention to the local news. So, like I said, I've known you, literally my whole life, because you and my brother are the same age, and I think you guys were in kindergarten when I was born.
I actually chased your mom down the street for a snow cone one time.
Naked, right? Isn't that how the story
absolutely
goes?
Butt naked. Yep.
Yeah, my mom was the snow cone driver. Yeah, yeah. And
I was 3 years old, so it was acceptable.
I think the kids in your class secretly hated me because my mom stopped driving the snow cone truck when I was born.
Yeah.
So, I'm the reason that the snow cone lady stopped driving the... Well, actually, it's my parents. They created me. It's really their fault. I had no control in it. But anyways, I remember one time we used to have a party every year. And we would all watch the All-Star game.
That was such a great night.
We need to start doing that
We
again,
do.
by the way. We need to get my brother to
Come on, Chad.
start having some fun in life and hang out with us again. But anyways, we were at the party, and it was actually at your house that year.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I was so pumped because the Braves had 3 pitchers who were on this historic run. I think this might have been 2011.
Yeah.
So we had what they called Ovembrel. It was Johnny Venters, Craig Kimbrell, and Eric O'Flaherty. That was our 7, 8, and 9 inning guys.
Yeah.
But we also had this dude named Jair Jurgens that was just having this tremendous year.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my brother and I both being angry because they weren't using any of the Braves pitchers. The National League wasn't. And then this storm starts brewing.
Mm-hmm.
Weather starts getting bad. All of a sudden, the National League's going to throw in Jair Jurgens. So Chad and I are getting excited. He starts running from the bullpen out to the mound, and the power goes off.
Yeah.
And I remember everybody was like, dang it, Trent. Like, you didn't. And I remember you were so serious, like trying to figure out, like, what's our backup plan? How are we going to watch this? And everybody was like giving you such a hard time. Like, you didn't see this coming. You couldn't have told us this was going to happen. Like, so there was that experience. But I do remember 2009. I had just gotten out of college, and I'd moved back home with my mom. And she was like, no, on your way home from work tonight, you stop and you get gas in every vehicle we have. And she's giving me this whole spiel. And I remember talking to my brother, and I was like, dude, this is not going to be that big of a deal. I'm like, they're just getting old people all worked up. And I even impersonated, not you, but just a meteorologist in general. And I was like, make sure you have a coat, you know, like doing the whole spiel. And then, darn it, if it wasn't the worst experience I've ever had in my life, like with weather. Yeah, no power for us for like a week. But I think I had friends because of the way that, like, it wasn't just that power lines fell. It was that, like, whole areas of trees, like, fell over, branches. Like, they couldn't even get service vehicles back to some of these communities for, like, a long time to fix the power. So I knew people that had to, like, move. They had to, like, families had to live together, and that went on for some people, I feel like, for like 6 weeks, 2 months. I mean, it was bad. 2011, like you said, we had that giant flood. So at that point, you know, 2009 is where I started thinking, maybe I should start listening to, you know, and I was 23 at the time. So, but that was kind of the first time I thought, maybe I should pay attention to the weather. And then, in 2011, that constant coverage of that flood really helped me because I had to move. I had to go live with my brother for like 6 weeks because the water was going to get into my house. And then you guys were educating us on, hey, they're going to blow these levees in Missouri, and that should cause the water to go down. But on Wednesday, you're all going to hear these explosions. Don't be alarmed. And I can vividly remember that. I was working at Allen Music, and I walked outside to do something, and I could hear those levees being blown up. And it was like, it was almost like a mini little earthquake kind of thing.
I mean, it's crazy. It's like 10:30 at night, and this is, 50 miles away, and it, like, rattled windows around here. And
and then 2013 was the real big one, man. And I remember this. I was, for me anyways, I had gotten out of church. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I think I was still living in Metropolis, but I was driving to Paducah to Midtown Market to just get some groceries. And I noticed as I was going through Brookport, there were no cars on the street. I'm like, what's going on? So I turned the local news on the radio, and you guys are giving the forecast. Hey, these tornadoes are coming. Everybody get to shelter right now. So I kind of altered my plans, went to my brother's house because he lived on this side of the river, and we were watching the live coverage of the tornadoes hitting Brookport, and we had 2 cousins get killed. And so from that moment on, I mean, like I said, in 2009, I had started really paying attention to what you guys were saying, but that changed a lot of people's lives. And then, man, the one in 2021, it didn't really affect my family, but just so many people in our community were affected. But in every one of those situations, so many more people could have died, been seriously injured, if we did not have you guys keeping us up to speed, giving us the warnings. So I want to thank you on behalf of the listeners and the audience for what you do. Because I know there are people who will give you crap. They'll argue on the WPSD Facebook page. They'll say stupid things. But the truth is, we have been kept safe because of Trent and his coworkers and their constant coverage. So I want to say thank you.
Well, thank you.
And then I want to ask, have you ever gotten like personal testimonies of people coming up and letting you know, hey, I altered my plans because of your coverage? Do you have any stories you can share with us?
I mean, gosh. Especially, again, the December 10th, that was the event that, like, we had immediately just people messaging on Facebook and emails, you know, their personal stories. Kind of the two that just jump out to me. The Friday, that tornado was on a Friday night. The next Friday, I went down to Mayfield. The Today Show was there, and I actually got the opportunity to do a quick 2-minute interview segment with Al Roker. And that was my first time actually going to Mayfield. I kind of mentally needed to just stay away for a few days because I needed some time myself to kind of recover from the coverage. Whenever I went down there, I just wanted to go by myself, kind of survey the scene a little bit, kind of take it in, and just kind of have my moment. And so I was actually standing out in front of the Mayfield courthouse looking at the memorial that was set up of all the people that lost their lives. And I was just kind of having my own kind of moment of reflection and prayer. And I was standing there crying in the rain, and it was just kind of a whole thing. And then these people come up and said, "Are you Trent?" I said, "Yes." And then this lady, I've never met her in my life, she just grabs me and gives me a hug, and she starts crying. And so we're like standing there crying together, and she's telling me that her and her husband lived in a mobile home over on the east side of Mayfield, and she could tell how bad it was going to be by the way that we were talking that night. And at one point I did say, if you live in a mobile home, you've got 45 minutes, you got to get out of it. And she said, "We did. We listened to you. We left, and we came back at like 1:30 in the morning, and our mobile home is literally gone. It's not there. And so if we had not heard your warning, we probably wouldn't be here either." And so that one was really raw and emotional because it happened like right after. And just a couple of years ago, this was, you know, still 2 or 3 years removed from the storm. I'm just standing at the gas station at the 5-Star pumping gas, and a guy comes up to me and says, "Hey, I need to tell you something. I need to shake your hand and tell you something." And he said that his daughter was on the production line at the candle factory in Mayfield, and she had a pretty bad fear of storms and heard how we were describing the potential for that night. And so he said, "My daughter decided to call in sick that night and did not go to work. And I just wanted to tell your team thank you, because the people that work on both sides of her died that night, and she probably wouldn't be here if she had gone to work." And so we just stand out there in the parking lot, and we're getting choked up and having a moment. And so, you know, those are the kind of things where it kind of just makes it real what you do. And, you know, I'm not any kind of hero or whatever. It's just, this is my job. This is what I do. But I'm glad that it has an impact. And for me, like, I'm glad it gives me satisfaction to know that people are listening and they have a plan, because even if you get the warning, you still have to know what you're going to do. You have to know where you're going to go, how you're going to stay safe in whatever situation you are in. And so the fact that people have that plan and are seeking out the information gives me satisfaction and fulfillment that, you know, what we're doing is effective and relevant.
Well, I know hero is a very strong term, but you guys really are. And every person I know that's a real rock star, a real game changer, they all say the same thing. I'm just trying to do my job. But we all have our job to do. And we all play a role in making up this beautiful, you know, tapestry that is like our community, humanity in general, but this community. But every person I've ever known who's made a huge impact, and I would start with my own mother, who worked in a grocery store for 31 years, but they all say that. I'm just trying to do my job. You know, I know people in law enforcement, but you know, air quotes, just doing your job. You're not just doing your job. It's not a paycheck to you. It's a calling.
Yeah, it is.
And you submitting to that calling and putting forth your best effort, you guys have, again, you've saved, there's no telling how many lives. And going back to 2013, who knows what would have happened? But I can tell you, if it wasn't for me turning on the radio and hearing that forecast, I would have driven right back through Brookport.
Yeah.
And it's only because I noticed, like, this is weird. There's nobody on the road.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on? But like I said, I thought, well, I better not do that. I better go to my brother's apartment, which is, I don't know, probably like 5 miles north of the river. I just need to stay away from Brookport. I don't need to drive right back through. But who knows? I could have driven right through and died. So, yeah, I mean, you guys, what you're offering and the service you're offering is invaluable. So, can't thank you enough again. I do want to ask just 2 more things.
Okay.
You talked about how the models and the equipment has really come a long way. Can you just briefly speak to that? Maybe, I don't even know what to ask you to compare it to. Okay, like cell phones when you first started. A lot of people still had flip phones.
Yeah.
And now everybody's got a mega computer in their pocket. Is there some type of analogy you could give me of just how far the equipment has come in the last 18 years?
I mean, I'd say it's probably comparable to like 90s cable TV versus high definition TV today. Like, whenever I started working here in 2007, I mean, we had pretty accurate forecasts. We had probably 3-4 models that we relied on. And now there's at least a dozen different forecast models out there. The accuracy of those forecast models has dramatically improved over time, especially in the last maybe 10 years. Radar and satellite technology both improved. Like, literally, satellite, we launched satellites into space in like 2017 or 18, I think, that were high definition satellites. And so you actually get a high definition look at what clouds look like from outer space. And radar has been a huge upgrade. There was, I forget what year, probably about 10, 12 years ago, radar went to what's called dual polarization technology. So basically, it sends a beam this way and then a beam this way. So you're getting a cross section, like a 2-dimensional look at what's falling from the sky. So that allows us to better tell if it's like rain or snow or hail, and then also allows us to know better like how those particles are moving, which ultimately helps us to determine if there's a tornado on the ground. But the accuracy has really improved, and there's some pretty exciting things, like with just in general, the more computing power that you can generate, the better forecast you're going to get.
Well, I'm going to say thank you before I ask you this last thing. Thank you again, not only for what you do, but just for being my friend, man. We actually bumped into each other the other day, and I don't know why I hadn't reached out to you yet, because when we first started this, you were actually like on the short list of about 5 people I wanted to have on. But I bumped into you, and it's always like no time passes, every time I see you. And, we've shared a lot of cool baseball memories over the years. But I just want to thank you again for your calling and submitting to it and really helping a lot of people. Trent is a rock star. I do want to tell you about 2 more rock stars real quick before I ask Trent this last question. Toby Glass, a good friend of mine, he's editing this podcast. Remember, if you guys need any media work done, you need to contact Metropolis Music and Media and ask for Toby.
What's up, Toby?
Yeah, what's up, Toby? And Celia Robertson at House to Home Realty. If you guys haven't already, go back to season 1, watch her episode when we talk about her running her real estate company. But we talked about tornadoes on that episode because, having lost 2 cousins, that is a very impactful thing for my entire family. And so every time I think about a living situation or, what kind of house do I want or where am I living, I always think about what's my contingency plan for a tornado. And maybe you're having those thoughts. You want to try to get in a better house. Celia is the person to call. So remember, contact House to Home Realty in Southern Illinois. All right, before I drop you off at the station, I got one last question here. And this can be anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be career related. But what are you looking forward to the most?
Oh, wow. Goodness.
Kind of a big one, huh?
Yeah, that's a big one. That's a loaded question. Um,
My mom said heaven, by the way.
yeah.
So I was like,
that would be good.
she went right to the top. Yeah. Yeah.
So like my scientific mind, like I'm so black and white on things. What am I mean, I'm always looking forward, like just kind of keeping it on the career thing, like the changing of the seasons and, you know, new challenges in my job. I'm I don't know, just living life, family time, spending time with my awesome son, my beautiful wife. I am always looking forward. I'm looking forward to hockey season. I'm a hockey fan now. I am looking forward to maybe some snow this winter. Yeah, you caught me off guard with that one. That's a good question.
Do you think we're getting snow this winter?
We'll see. We're always good for at least one decent snowstorm, I think, as long as it's not ice.
Right.
We like that. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of great things to look forward to, but we can all be grateful that we have great news coverage to look forward to. And again, Trent, thank you for coming on. And we really do need to have that party again next year.
We do.
So,
That's one thing that I'm looking forward to is we need to get the All-Star Game party back on. I mean, you talk about like that's a core memory. We got together, we grilled steaks, watched some good baseball, had some good times. So, Chad, make that happen.
yeah, Chad. And we need the National League not to suck too and lose. So
Yeah.
that's what we need.
Yeah.
All right, brother. Well, I'm going to drop you off. I really appreciate
All right,
you
buddy.
coming on.
Thank you. Appreciate it.